welcome back to the return of Witchcraft and Voodoo. Did you miss it? We missed it. I missed it so much. Yay!
Yeah, me too. I really missed it.
Yes.
I'm so glad we're doing this again. It's awesome.
I know. I missed it so much. I'm Voodoo Priestess Lilith Dorsey, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sable Aradia. Introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Sable Aradia, and I'm a Wiccan Priestess.
And we decided it would be nice to sit down and have these conversations and really talk about some of the similarities and differences between, you know, Wicca and Voodoo. As we're both priestesses, we've both been doing this a long time, and it's a lot of fun. And tonight we're going to talk about ancestors, which I realized when I was going back over the rest of what we had done that we hadn't covered ancestors. And for me, the ancestors are everything. I always say the dead first, last, and always, because we honor the dead in almost everything that we do. We honor them from the minute we wake up with our first cup of coffee to a lot of times, you know, the meditations we do as we're going to sleep, the altars we're taking care of before we go to bed. All those things have to do with the ancestors. And I think that we wouldn't be where we were if it wasn't for the ancestors. So for us, you know, especially a tradition that came from people that were oppressed and slavery and Middle Passage and, you know, all the things that we have going on. Our ancestors got us to this point, and we need to thank them for that, and we need to honor them for that, and we need to realize that they had strengths and things to teach us, even if, you know, we didn't want to listen when we were little. So what do you think?
Oh, that's really cool. And, you know, I totally see that. You know, maybe that's the African influence too, right? Because, you know, ancestors are so important to a lot of different African cultures, so that makes perfect sense. Oddly, Wicca isn't quite as focused on that. This is one thing where we have a strong difference. And it's not like the ancestors aren't important to witches. It's just that it's like we have very specific things that we do and specific times where we honor the ancestors. It's not part of our everyday routine. And I guess that probably comes from, I don't know, white Christian influence, really, which tends to compartmentalize the dead. And I find this a contradiction in theology because Wicca is very much about the balance between life and death, and the fact that death is a part of life and cycles are integral. And we believe in reincarnation. We believe that, well, okay, most of us believe in reincarnation. The original Wiccans believed in reincarnation. I can't say all Wiccans and witches do, but a lot of us do. And so we believe, you know, we're going to come back and we're going to try this again, right? So, there's two main ways in which we honor the ancestors. And the first is Samhain, which, for those who don't know, is Halloween, or May the 1st if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's specifically believed to be a time where the veil between the worlds is thin. So that means that ancestors and otherworldly beings are more able to reach us if they have messages for us. So our Samhain celebrations are very focused on that, and we give them our undivided attention at that time. Everything that happens around Samhain, either, you know, people might do an underworld journey, but the idea is to communicate with your loved ones who've gone before and your ancestors, and, you know, see if they have messages for you or resolve unresolved issues or whatever it is. And or it might be that we do something called the Dumb Supper, which is where we invite our ancestors and passed on loved ones to join us at the table. We provide a plate for them and offer food, right? And some of us will share our stories about these people that mattered to us in our lives before we sit down to eat, and then we'll do it in complete silence. And the idea is that in the silence, you can hear the dead speak. So, and that's something that I've had some really powerful experiences with. I was able to communicate with my grandfathers that I had never met in my actual life that way, and I got the strong sensation that they approved of me. So that was kind of fun, right? Because, you know. And okay, so the other way in which we honor the ancestors is we're pretty focused on honoring ancestors of the craft. People who come from, if we're part of an initiatory tradition, for example, we will talk about, you know, old Dorothy Clutterbuck, right? And the old means that they're a beloved ancestor who's believed to continue to guide and aid witches in that line of descent, or that who look to them for inspiration. It's become a tradition of the Church of All Worlds, which isn't Wiccan but is pagan, to read a roll of people in the craft who have died in the past year, and to, you know, give them honor and acknowledgement. And my coven and tradition have incorporated that as part of our practice too. So this is, these are the two big things that we do.
I just want to mention, since you just mentioned, you know, Caw, it's the anniversary of Morning Glory's death. And, you know,
oh, it is,
I loved her dearly. You know, I had the opportunity to, you know, not necessarily do ritual with her, but I had the opportunity to speak with her and hang out with her and really get to know her. And she was a wonderful woman. So, you know, just all props to Morning Glory up there.
Absolutely. I never had the chance to meet her. I've met and spoken on 2 different occasions. He was on my podcast, Oberon, right? Oberon,
oh, nice.
Right. So, but I can see the influence that she's had through him and through her own work as well, right? I mean, it's from her we get the term polyamorous. Yes. I am a polyamorous person, so that's important to me, right? So, yeah, it is. It's fortuitous. What a good choice of topic today, Lilith.
I know. Well, I'm always thinking about the ancestors, but yeah, it's funny because I'm also thinking a lot lately about foremothers, you know, because I'm working on a class about that, you know, and I think in a lot of ways, you know, Morning Glory really was a foremother for a lot of us, you know, in the pagan movement and things like that, and also in this sort of melding between, you know, feminism and witchcraft, not necessarily in the way that we think of it today, but in being a pioneer in what she did and what she stood for and how she really spoke out, you know. And it's funny, I'm listening to you say those things that you do. We do all those things. We do a dump supper. Awesome. And we do something that, you know, before we do a reading, before we leave any offerings, you know, in Ifa or Santeria or Haitian Voodoo or in New Orleans Voodoo and all those traditions, we do a litany of all of our line of ancestors going back as far as we know. We call them, you know, most often they're called the Mojibas, which stands for thank you. So it's, you know, basically just a list of thank yous of everybody who brought us to where we are today, you know. And as part of the training for my house, I have my god kids do a prayer every morning with their coffee to all the ancestors that are remembered, you know. So for us, like I said, we start out that way with those thank yous for all of our ancestors. And I think it's really a beautiful way of just sort of repositioning yourself in the cosmic scheme of things, you know, because when you think about all of that, you know, I think about my grandmothers. I had one that came here that didn't speak any English. The only thing she knew how to say was me first, which I love. Me first, awesome. Me first.
That is awesome.
Yeah. yeah. So, but, you know, I think about all these, you know, women and men that got us to where we are today. And it's really important, you know, and for us, there are some things I think we do that are unique, and I'm all about the props today. So one of the things we do is we make little soul jars for our ancestors. And this has dirt from the cemetery and also herbs that go along with the different Loa and Orisha that honor the dead, you know. So, and we have this on our Ancestor Altar, and we make that in my house as part of a way that, you know, we can put those things together. So that way when it is Samhain and we're doing an extra big thing for the Barons and the Gede, because in Haitian Vodou, our Samhain is a ceremony for, you know, the Barons, which are the named dead, and the Gede, which are the unnamed dead, and, you know, how they help us. So we can have actual, you know, something that was there that represents these different ancestors, and we can feed them and give them their coffee and their cigarettes and all the rest of the things, and they can join the party with us, which I think is really beautiful. And it really joins us together as a house. You know, before I started doing it, it was kind of hard to get a handle sometimes on people, and now that I feel like we have these things together here on our ancestor altar in the temple, that it really helps us connect to one another and connect to those people that aren't here anymore.
That's fantastic. You know, that's interesting. Some of us, not all of us, but some of us also keep an ancestor altar. I do. As a matter of fact, it's sitting right behind the computer at the moment, because I keep it in a window ledge that's just behind the computer and around the surrounding. So they're there to inspire me when I'm doing my creative work, because this is where I do all of that sort of thing. So a lot of us will do that, right? And, you know, little mementos and pictures. One of the things that I have, I love the soul jar idea. That is very cool, right? I have a memory box, which I made up for, I lost a baby, right? I had a miscarriage, right? So I keep all the little things associated with that baby that I never had into this little memory box, which is, you know, a treasure. And I put it on my ancestor altar, and I look to it when, you know, I don't know, just when the need strikes me, I guess, when I want to connect. So that's interesting that maybe there are more similarities than I thought. So that's kind of cool. And four mothers you spoke of, which obviously is also a big deal to witches in particular, and the goddess-oriented witches especially, right? And it's, you know, like, it's important because all of our history remembers our forefathers, right? It's all, you know, this man was this ruler, and this, you know, man led this army, and this man, you know, founded this family. But what about the women? You know, what were they doing? Were they, you know, standing by watching? Generally not, you know. so we give them special attention, right? We focus on that in particular. So that's an interesting point too.
Yeah, I think it is, you know, and I'm glad you mentioned that about the memory box you had. You know, I had a daughter that passed, and I have a separate altar for her, you know, and I think one of my goddaughters, she became orphaned at a very young age. She hadn't even finished high school, you know, and I think when she would talk about why she wanted to join our tradition, it was because it allowed us to have a more open connection with those who have passed, you know, like it helped her get through those transitions and still have that energy in her life, you know, in both a personal and a daily way, and, you know, through food. Her father was a chef who cooked for Emerald, you know, so there were so many different things that we did through the cooking, through the altars, through the, you know, I mentioned before, we do ritual flags, you know, for a lot of the ancestors that are in our house. She did a flag for her father that was like cross shotguns with his emerald laminate badge to get backstage. It was really beautiful. So it was nice that she could incorporate all those things that were for him and then take it out. You know, we took it out with, you know, his widow was there the first time we debuted it, you know, and now it's so nice. It's like we have a piece of him as part of the house, and we can all sort of share it and remember him.
That's beautiful. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's nice. I like it.
Yeah,
really
oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to say anything. Go ahead.
I just, I think that witches are one of the reasons why people find witchcraft, as opposed to, okay, like if we were satisfied with what is offered to us in our culture, we would be Christians or atheists, right? And we're not. So why aren't we? One of the reasons why, I think, is because most of us are looking for that kind of connection to our history and those who came before us, right? And cultural influences, and to see where they've gone wrong, and, you know, maybe do some healing in that respect, right? But also where they were right, and where we've lost part of that, right? We've got sort of this myth like the good old days were better, and of course that's nonsense. I don't believe that at all, right? The good old days were just different, and people had their trials in their own individual ways at any given time. So, you know, you can't say that, but maybe there are some things that we have lost. I think one of those things is that connection to ancestors, to our dead, to our sick even, right? Because the culture that we come from tends to compartmentalize that and kind of keep it hidden away. And, you know, nobody wants to admit that we're all going to die someday, right? But of course we are, right? And do we really want to think that that's it? You know, many of us do. There's no reason why you have to believe in a literal god and goddess or a literal afterlife in order to be a witch. There are many who don't. But a lot of us do think that there's something else. And so for us, that connection is really, you know, it's a big deal. And that's part of what also is done on Samhain, the idea that we're opening the door. So I think that perhaps, again, maybe there are more similarities between our paths than I thought. Maybe this is one of the things that defines a pagan faith.
No, I think you're right. I think it does, because I think we need to believe in things in a creative way. And I think that, you know, if anybody who's had a lot of people close to them that have passed, it makes you see things in a different way. It makes you understand things in a different way. It really does, you know. I mean, I wish I hadn't lost all those people, you know, that I had lost, but I have lost quite a few people way before their time, you know, and it's definitely given me a different outlook on things and a different way of how I practice my spirituality and how I understand death and process death. And you know, and I think you're right. I think in a lot of ways, some of our ancestors, even if they weren't necessarily actively pagan, they had a much, you know, better understanding of it, in the sense, you know, I grew up with my grandparents and they used to go to the cemetery all the time, and it would be like an outing, and you would take food and you'd sit there and have a picnic and you'd clean up, and it was about like still really remembering those people, and people don't really do that anymore, and I think it's a shame.
I agree with you. I really think it's a shame too. I think it just leads us to feel disconnected. And I think that we get, by not maintaining that connection, right, we get this false idea, first of all, that we're coming up with everything original, which is nonsense. Like every generation thinks they invented sex and their parents never did it that way.
Sure.
And you're wrong. Right? And we don't remember our history. I mean, you know, look what's going on right now. Like, I don't want to get too much into politics, but it seems to me that a lot of what's going on is that people don't have that connection, and so aren't aware of why their ancestors handled things in the way that they did, and they don't really, you know, they don't know intuitively what the consequences of some of the decisions that we're making now can be, because they don't remember what they were. An example that's, you know, a relatively minor controversy, right, would be this idea, this anti-vaccine movement, right? I think that, you know, because people are like, oh, well, you know, I never get sick. Well, okay, the reason why you never get sick is because everybody decided to do vaccinations. If you would talk to your grandparents, you would understand the horrors of polio, and then you would damn well get your kids vaccinated, because that is scary stuff, but nobody remembers that, right? You know, tuberculosis was almost wiped out completely, but we lost the connection with what our ancestors had done, and this anti-vaccine movement is now making a comeback. And this is, I mean, like, we're undoing ourselves. We're shooting ourselves in the foot by not being aware of what people before us have done. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that, but it's a shame.
No, I agree. I mean, I did get my kids vaccinated. I got them half vaccinations, which is a thing in case anybody knows that. But, you know, and I do. I think it's again, it's sort of this folly about their own mortality. You know what I mean? Like this is something that's very serious. And I think that because we're so cushioned and, you know, the life expectancy is gotten so high that we don't necessarily deal with it. Some of us, like I mentioned, deal with it more than others, unfortunately, you know, but for a lot of people, it is something that's distant and something they want to avoid and not look at and not be realistic about. And I think that being in touch with your ancestors gives you a whole nother level of realism. You know, we were talking about losing a child. You know, when I lost my daughter, I thought about my grandmother lost, you know, more than one child, you know, more than one child that was already born, you know. So again, I think that it definitely gives you a sort of perspective on things, which is, you know, you might think you're having a bad day. We were talking before about having a bad day because, you know, whatever, I knocked the plugs out and I broke a glass and I couldn't find my eyeliner.
My headphones, you know, before we could do this. Yeah, it was one of those days today.
Yeah, it gives you a perspective about a bad day and the kind of bad days that, you know, my grandparents lived through the Depression and things like that. It definitely gives you, you know, it gives perspective to, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be annoyed about, you know, having to wait 20 minutes to get out of the line at the grocery store, you know, like that's, at least there is food and at least I can afford to have food. And I think that this is something a lot of people take for granted and our grandparents didn't.
Yeah, well, you're right. Like, I agree with you completely. For me, the big run-ins with mortality were first that miscarriage, right, that I spoke of, because I had done everything right and it all went wrong anyway, right? And, I've got internet connection is unstable again. Okay, so am I back?
No, you're still frozen.
Am I still with you?
I can, now you're back. Yay.
Now I'm back. Okay. So where did you lose me? In the miscarriage?
Yes, I could hear you, but I didn't see you. So yes.
Okay. All right. So for me, the big run-in with my mortality first was the miscarriage, because I'd done everything right, but it all went wrong anyway. So there went the illusion that, you know, if you eat all the right foods and, you know, exercise and avoid bad things for you, that you're going to be just fine, because you don't know, right? It can happen at any time. And the other one for me was when my husband was in that awful car accident, because they gave him a 0% chance of survival. He made it, but they didn't think he was going to. And that was a real wake-up call for me. And it's because I have been insulated to that in my culture. Now, since then, of course, I'm getting older now, right? I'm in my mid-40s. I'm at an age where I'm starting to lose friends who have not necessarily, you know, things happen. Like one good friend of mine died of pancreatic cancer, or, you know, another friend had a heart attack. He was younger than I am, you know, and, you know, you realize that the death is not going away and there's nothing you can do to avoid it. It's going to come for you sooner or later. So, but if you have that connection with first your elders and then your ancestors, then you can, you know, you've already realized that, right? You've already made that connection, and I think you're better prepared, right? So this is why I feel very strongly that this is an important aspect of culture that we need to, well, we who come to paganism are trying to I don't know, I mean, the Afro-Caribbean traditions have their own integrated way of dealing with it, obviously, which I think is awesome and I admire, right? But over here, I feel like we're reinventing the wheel in a lot of cases. We're trying to reinvent traditions that used to exist but don't really exist anymore, because for most of white Western culture anyway, it was always the church was the place you went to deal with that. And of course, we're not going to the church. We're not finding our solace there. So we have to find different things, different ways to communicate. I'd like to recommend a book. It's called The Pagan Book of Living and Dying. It's put out by Starhawk, M. Maka Nightmare, and Reclaiming, I guess is if I remember correctly, that's who they listed as the author. And this was very good for me in finding ways to connect with ancestors and deal with death and grief and loss and all of these things that we all have to eventually do in our lives. So that's something I would suggest. I think that the Norse pagans have a much better grasp of this whole business than the Wiccans do. I've got to give them credit there. They're very much in touch with their ancestors, and I mean, sometimes I think they over fetishize it a little bit, and then that gets into some dark territory. But in general, I think that they've really got, that they've figured that out, and we could take notes,
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that they do. And I think it's, it's kind of twofold, I think. I mean, I think part of it has to do with, in a lot of ways, I grew up going to Norwegian Lutheran school. That's a whole nother story. But I think in a lot of ways, it was all about the Vikings and Norse culture. But I think in a lot of ways that they were much more, compared to the other ethnic groups that I saw here in the US and abroad, that they were much more cohesive about their history. That it was much more of a, importance given to it, whereas we don't do that so much here that I've seen, and I mean, from the religion wise, I think that there's, I'm really fond of, I love Diana Paxson and we've been friends for ages. And I think Diana's done a lot of work in the community to sort of, give people honorable ways that they can incorporate these energies into their lives, through her transpossession work and things like that. So that I'll say that about the Norse people. But what I love about, our thing too, is that it's a two-way street. The way our cosmology works is that, if I live a good life, if I help a lot of people, if I'm a good person, then after I've passed, then people will honor me on their ancestor altars, and that will help elevate me even after I've gone. My god kids make jokes about leaving White Castle cheeseburgers on the altar for me. So yeah, and probably some green stuff, but yes, that's what they would put there for me to elevate me. But and that's the way it is. And it's sad to say, my godmother, I just lost one of my Santo godmothers this year, and she was a young woman, and having to help do the elevation and dealing with her stuff has been very hard, but she was a good person, and hopefully she'll have enough ashe and energy from all of her godchildren, me included, that will help to elevate her on her journey. That's what we hope for. That's all we can hope for.
We've got a similar concept in witchcraft. Not, I guess some people believe in a form of elevation. Not everyone does. Some people think it's presumptuous. Whatever, in my opinion. But we say what remembers lives, right? So the memory, keeping memory alive of those who have gone before us is very important, because then they remain, right? So hopefully, if, like you say, if you're living a good life, right, you want people to remember you, and then you continue on after you're gone, and you maintain sort of a connection to what's going on. I think we all, Judy Harrow wrote in her excellent book, Wicca Covens, that most of us have an urge to, generativity, right? We want to create a legacy in some way. And a lot of us resolve this by having children. And some of us resolve this by trying to create great works of art. And some of us resolve this by trying to create community and reach out to help people. But whatever form you're using to do that, ultimately, you want to leave your impact on the world. That's what drives us to do that. We want to improve the world and make it a better place after we're gone. We want those who follow us, our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our students, whatever it might be, we want them to have a better world than the one that we lived in, and have better chances than we have. So we're all trying to contribute in that way. And I think that all of our ancestors did and do the same thing. So, I mean, isn't it a good idea to want to know what those gifts were that they were trying to leave us? And, you know, doesn't that, if you understand that, I think it makes it easier to overcome. I mean, every family's got its dysfunction, right? So it makes it easier for you to address the dysfunctions in your own family and find connection and forgiveness, even if your relationship with your nuclear family has been toxic, right? So another good reason to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people are always asking me about what to do with, you know, ancestors that they didn't like, you know, and I always said, if you wouldn't invite them in your house when they were alive, you know, you don't have to invite them in after they've passed. I don't, you know, like some of us come from some real nasty pieces of work out there, you know, but I think just understanding, you know, some of the people even maybe around those people, if they, you know, like I said, if they were horrible, then don't invite them into your house. But, you know, maybe some of the other people in your life that you didn't even get a chance to know, you know, people who passed before you were born, you know, I think that this is a wonderful way of being able to access, you know, that kind of knowledge and energy and information. And what else was I going to say? All right, this is going long. I could talk about ancestors all night, but
Yeah, fair enough. I'll just throw in there, based on what you just said, that, okay, I believe in spirits that continue on and sometimes maintain connection with the world. Some people call them ghosts. Okay. How I believe you should treat them is this: dead people are people too. So they come in wonderful and they come in jerk and they stay too long after the party and they are rude. And while, you know, and sometimes they're really nice and helpful. And sometimes they're all of these things at once, depending on the different occasion. And, you know, I believe that their existence doesn't, you know, they know things that time and space limit us from knowing as physical beings. But that doesn't mean they're always right. And it doesn't mean that, you know, you should just drop everything when they show up. If anything, they've got more time than you do. So if you're a medium type and you've got ghosts waking you up at 2 o'clock in the morning, tell them the dad will wait till, you know, 9 o'clock and you've had your coffee, right? Because, you know, they can wait, right? But be respectful, right? Because, yeah, they do know things you don't, and they've lived experiences that you haven't. So just as you would go to your elder and ask them about experiences, so you should approach the ancestors.
I agree. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this renewed, yay, episodes of Witchcraft and Voodoo. This is fantastic. And we're going to keep doing more of them, hopefully. And yeah, you can find me at lilithdorsey.com. You can find Sable. You want to tell them where?
At Sable Aradia at sablearadia.com.
All right. Yeah, yay, we make it easy.
Yeah, and hey, this isn't, obviously we're not doing a live stream format anymore, but as always, if you have questions or you have suggestions for topics or whatever else, feel free to put them in the comments. Contact us at our websites, on our social media. We're both on Twitter. You can search us both under our names there, right? Let us know.
All right, yay. Bye.
Yay. Bye, everybody.